Welcome back to my channel, guys. Today I want to talk about this idea that we hear all the time, which is that more and more people are becoming gay. You particularly hear this kind of rhetoric coming from conservative news outlets, which express concern over more and more people going the route of homosexuality and what is happening to society and why is this happening. And you actually hear even more nowadays, as of the last 5 years maybe, the same conversation around trans people, that more and more people are becoming trans and why is this happening, and what about the children? More and more children are becoming trans. There's this panic, particularly from conservative media sources. I actually made a video touching on this briefly a few years back. I made a video dissecting another video by Candace Owens. For those of you who are familiar with Candace Owens, I'll link my video somewhere up here. But Candace Owens if you're not familiar with her, she's a famous, I would say even notoriously conservative commentator, and she says a lot of things that I think are very reckless and dangerous. And the tide has actually been turning on Candace Owens recently. Um, she's always been controversial, but recently, I feel like the last 6 months or so, there's been more criticism of her than ever, because she just keeps getting more and more wild with some of the stuff that she talks about. But anyway, in my video dissecting her video, I talked about how there is this, like, again, this panic of why are more people becoming gay, and I think it's a very misguided conversation. I do think there are more people openly gay than ever before. I think that's a huge part of it. I think it's just more visible because people don't feel as ashamed, as afraid. There's places in the world where it's illegal to be gay. There are nations where it's punishable by law to be gay or trans. So naturally, there you have fewer pride parades and people openly gay, and you open apps like Grindr. I remember going to the Middle East in 2019, and it was really interesting to see in places like Egypt, Dubai, in the Emirates. Dubai is in the Emirates. Um, these are places where you see way more profiles on apps like Grindr that are discreet, right? Where people are more afraid to show their photos because it's more taboo. Not only taboo, there's more risk involved to be gay in a society where it's punishable by law. But I also think there's an important phenomenon happening that isn't really talked about enough. And I think it's, again, related to this idea of discretion, discreet guys and down low guys. I think this is a huge culture, and it's a bubble within the bubble of gay society, gay community, whatever you want to call it. People who are gay, people who are bisexual, people who are what's the word, like fluid, like they don't put a label on it, right? Or pansexual, right? There's all these different terms. They're in the bubble of, under the LGBT umbrella, but they don't talk about it. They don't vocalize it. They're not the kind of people who you would find at a pride parade, or the kind of people who you would see making a YouTube video like this. As a result, I think mainstream society has no clue about that piece of the puzzle. And so on the surface, it looks like more people are becoming gay, but it's really, these people have always existed. Again, some of them are just more vocal. But I also think what's happening is that more people who are on, can we say, the spectrum of sexuality are dipping their toes into homosexuality. A perfect example, I've mentioned months ago that seeing a guy on and off, it's complicated. And he is one of several men now that I've met, particularly since the pandemic, by the way, which is interesting, who during the pandemic had an aha moment and wanted to explore this facet of their sexuality. With him in particular, he was married to a woman for a decade, and now they're divorced. So now he's exploring the other side. And when you think about somebody like him, he's not the first man I've met who used to be married to a woman and now is exploring his sexuality with guys. He's not the first. And I think it's a great case study because 50 years ago, divorce was much more taboo. In certain parts of the world, divorce is still very taboo, but in the US now, I think it's something like 50% of marriages end in divorce. That is an insane statistic. So obviously, the sanctity of marriage is just not how it used to be regarded in society. But there was a time where divorce was a lot more rare in society, and there's a lot of reasons for that, right? It's culture evolving, but there's also the liberation of women through education and having their own independent careers. Suddenly, if they don't need a man, that changes these dynamics, right? So suddenly now, fast forward to modern day, you have more people getting divorced. So the guy that I mentioned decades ago would have never gotten divorced. And so he either would have been down low, or from what he told me, he would have soldiered on. That was the phrase he used. He would have just kept that door closed, that part of his sexuality. He would have stayed loyal to his wife and just kept blinders on with his curiosity. And I think that's what's happening. I think as society is becoming, at least American society is becoming more accepting of the LGBT umbrella, exposed to more than ever, right? Not just a pride parade in person, but even stuff like gay porn, right? The ease and the access of that. I think what's happening is a lot more people are awakening to an openness or uh, a flexibility of or versatility in their sexuality. And some of us can't relate to that, right? Some of us came out of the womb knowing we were gay, like me. Some people are 100% heterosexual. But my experience as a gay adult has taught me that it seems like a really huge portion of society is actually somewhere on the spectrum. And with all these societal and cultural shifts over time, I think a lot of people are realizing that they're somewhere on the spectrum where they were always straight before, like the guy that I mentioned. So is it really that more people are becoming gay or trans? I don't think so. I think what's happening is more people are embracing what was always there, but that they might have been conditioned to shut off. And let me not talk about the trans thing, because like what credibility do I have to talk about that? But on the gay side, right? I think part of the issue too is society. And when I say society, I mean heterosexual society. The average person in America has such a black and white mindset about sexuality. I mean, all the girls who I'm friends with, I see it in how they frame things. They're still so traditional and cookie cutter in their idea of what romance and love is supposed to look like. And it's so funny to me how they're all fine with gay people, but if they ever found out that a guy they were dating was bi or experimented once with a guy, that would be the end of it. Because in their minds, in those women's minds, well, then you're gay. You're gay or you're straight. It's black and white. And so I think people like Candace Owens, who spread this rhetoric, I think they fail to realize that it's really sexuality and all of this. It's really a Venn diagram. Except, unlike most Venn diagrams, the middle area, the gray area, is far larger than the purely gay or purely straight, the purely black or the purely white pieces of society that are 100% heterosexual or 100% gay. Is it possible that this increase in societal acceptance of gay people and all LGBT people, is it possible that that is also manipulating people into thinking they're gay or trans or whatever? That's the rhetoric that we hear, right? Again, from people like Candace Owens. It's possible, but I would argue that so many people, like the guy that I mentioned who was married for a decade to a woman, that they were being manipulated by the heteronormative ideology, right? People always talk about the gay agenda. If there's a gay agenda, then there's definitely a straight agenda that we were all exposed to from birth, right? So at the end of the day, for somebody to question something about themselves, I don't know that that's a bad thing. Now, of course, what you hear about, the trans conversation is that certain things are not reversible, right? Historically, the gay thing was pray the gay away, go to Christian camp, right? And we all know that those aren't really effective if you look at the data and the statistics. But the difference with the trans conversation is, of course, around the idea of children going through hormone therapy and reassignment surgery and all that stuff. Again, I don't want to delve too much into that topic because I feel like I don't have the credibility to speak on it. But I do think, like most things, including, let's say, the Me Too movement, that any negative outcome or possibility is far outweighed by the benefits of more people getting to live their truth and live it earlier on, and hopefully as a result have less future trauma. I think another thing that's happening too in our society is that, going back to the divorce rate, more and more people are becoming disillusioned with the standard and traditional nature of dating and courtship and relationships. So more and more people, I think, are moving away from things like marriage. And when you think about the societal pressure on both men and women, straight men and straight women, to go through this dance of courtship. I mean, I remember having a coworker in college who had the audacity to say this out loud, that she would only get married to a guy if the wedding ring was a third of his annual salary. To me, that is so gnarly to have that expectation, to spend a third of your salary on a ring. But maybe, again, I'm not wired for these heterosexual traditions. So for me, it's just absurd. Like, I would rather invest that money in something that will lead to more money, like a business or the stock market. Like, to me, buying jewelry to show a commitment to somebody is, it's absurd. But I'm also not the target audience, right? Not just as a gay person, but as a non-religious person. I don't see marriage as like this holy sacred thing. But anyway, I digress. But what I'm trying to say is, I think what's happening is a lot of these people, particularly men, who do exist on the spectrum of sexuality. I personally think, from my experience of men I've hooked up with and dated, who are not 100% gay, and that you would never know, that the average person would never, their gaydar would never pick up that they are into guys. I think a lot of these men are realizing that they are capable of not dating women. And so now that that option has been unlocked in their minds, the societal pressure that comes with dating and courting a woman, right, especially if those men don't want to have kids, I think makes them now more likely to explore being with guys. Because with gay men, there's fewer expectations for commitment. You can use an app like Grindr or Sniffies, right, which I've talked about on this channel many times, for just casual, no strings attached fun without having to take somebody out to dinner. Now, I'm not saying that this is all, great. I think there are great elements, and I think there are unfortunate elements that I feel like gay men, as a result, kind of get the scraps oftentimes of, these down low guys and stuff like that. And so it's also on gay men to be as emotionally and mentally healthy and prepared for this. That being said, I have often felt that as a gay person, I live in this separate bubble from society where the band-aid is ripped off. Like, I feel like, it's like the pill, the red pill and the blue pill in the Matrix. I feel like I live in the bubble where I see the truth. And again, women like the women I mentioned who I'm friends with, they kind of live in that Disney fantasy that they were fed from infancy. And therefore, the irony is, those women that I'm friends with are the most likely to attract a guy who's down low or whatever, because they wouldn't even know what to look for as long as a guy is super deceptive. As gay people, we live in a different world where we see things, we see the mask getting taken off of so many men. And it's sad, but I also would rather live in this world where I see what I'm really dealing with, and how many married men there are out there, married to women, that is, who have these secret lives on the side. So I'm personally proud of more and more people, men and women, who are exposing themselves now to a different way of thinking, a different way of living. I could never date a woman. I don't know how these, I have so much admiration for bisexual people, because I'm like, how are you that open-minded? I am not that open-minded. But I think it's beautiful, and I think it's brave as well to live that way, that you used to only date women, and maybe you were even married to a woman, and now you're exploring this completely different facet of what you're curious about. Let me know in the comments what you think, as always, and catch you next time.